So I always like to bring on good guests, great guests. I think I have one of my favorite guests on today, Jake Burns from the OBR. Jake, how are you doing right now, man?
Quincy, I'm good, man. We are all laboring through a very toxic period for this fan base of opinions. I always say I don't think any of these come from an evil place. I think everybody wants to win. Their picture of how they win, organization wins, is pretty different from person to person. And in that frustration, we find a way to take it out on each other sometimes. And we're in the middle of it, as you know, despite actually a relatively good 5 week stretch of 3-2 football here. They've done pretty well. Lost a really freezing frostbite cold game that could have went either way, but still people are mad. Playoffs are over, and from that comes a lot of discourse that makes you roll your eyes. But we're surviving. We're doing okay, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and like I find it difficult to have some of these conversations because of the I guess we could say it's the climate of the conversations right now, because it's hard to disperse who is just coming out of like straight up bad faith, they're trying to prove a point, and who is actually like coming out of concern, because sometimes you get blind to an ideal because you've heard people use it out of bad faith, right? But it can actually be something sometimes where it's like, okay, there might be some merit to it, not as extreme as like somebody's trying to go with it, but there might be some. And that's what I find difficult to parse about this whole thing, because even if I say something that's like a moderate lean in any direction when it comes to any of these topics, like when it comes to Kevin, I automatically get pushed into a category, right? Like I'm not allowed to kind of exist on the margins here. Same thing happened around this time with Baker Mayfield, because this was what, post Green Bay game, post 3 interception disaster game, about to be on that 5 sack Pittsburgh game that really just stamped a death sentence on his time in Cleveland. But as far as Kevin goes, I think, we can all point to some pros with Kevin. We can all point to cons with him, right? Like the existence of one or the other doesn't make him immune to anything else, or doesn't make him responsible for the whole situation either. But when you look at the offense, we have noticed the trend where like, hey, the last few weeks of the last 3 seasons, the offense hasn't been trending in the direction that we've wanted it to, especially when it comes to some of the run efficiency stuff. What do you think the next evolution of this offense looks like in order to kind of make sure that, I don't know if it's predictability. I don't know if it's just they wear down because of this style of play. But what do you think they can do to evolve that? And how does Deshaun Watson figure into that evolution?
Yeah, so they're broken, and I don't think I'm telling you anything that is not pretty well known at this point. They're not playing well. Look at their points per game. They're in transition of who they want to be and how they want to get there. Now, this run issue started well before Deshaun got here to play. It really happened after the bye, where teams have sort of started to put a finger on what's happening up front. They've been getting beat physically up front. There's a guy or two. They just haven't been in sync. A guy or two misses a block, whatever. In the run fails, right? Doesn't get what they should get, or is a negative play, so on and so forth. And they've tried to stick with it. They're continuing to do what they do and how they do it and go about business as usual. I don't think they have felt any great urgency to rip the rug out right now, so to say. They're trying to keep everybody harmonious in what they know. Obviously, signs to me, Quincy, outside of the air raid goofiness article that was written by CBS. And again, I don't think Jonathan, I think it's Jonathan Jones wrote that article. He's not a bad reporter. He's getting that from somebody. There is an urgency to get some different voices into how they go about structuring offense. Doesn't mean you have to go and say, hey, Georgia, can we have Todd Monken back? But it does mean that they're going to look to create some different voices in that room. And philosophically, I think that's probably going to happen organically, but I do think the Browns could benefit from somebody outside of the Kubiak and Shanahan type tree that can give some opinions on, hey, here's what we do, here's what we've done, here's what you can do. This is something that we've done, and it's cheap yards, easy yards, whatever. So listen, they're broke up front. And the thing that's concerning to me, and I just wrote about it yesterday, is that they're not getting results from play action. And this offense largely is beneficial because you get a lot of results from play action, marrying the run and pass, Kubiak, Shanahan, McVay, stuff like that. Stuff is well documented. It's been efficient in the league for a while, but I think defenses are getting more and more exposed to it. And if you're not a on the fly savant the way Shanahan is, and sometimes McVay can be, even though they've been bottled up, you run into stretches of where teams have been exposed to this offense so often in the last 5 years. They really have a feel for what the concepts are off boot action. They have a feel for what the concepts are off of your West Coast staples, right? And I think that what's going on is some of the things that they've done here traditionally, teams have felt and figured out. Like 2020, Kevin's first year, they were third in EPA and play action passes, 13 touchdowns, 1 interception in play action designs. It fell off a little bit in 2021. The next year, just last year, they slipped to 13th in EPA. And I think that at that point, too, they went down to 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And then this year, it's been a complete non-beneficial system for them. They have fell to 23rd in EPA this year in play action passes, only 3 touchdowns and 4 interceptions using play action concepts. And as we know, that is just, it's not acceptable for what they should be with this offense. So to me, and thing that is bothersome too is that every year the pressure rate has grown, right? So they're not only are they unable to create downfield answers, they're not able to find quick answers, right? Those quick slides to the flat, the backside drag, all those things that have traditionally been answers are not there because teams are just getting more accustomed to feeling a lot of those flood concepts and variations out. And it's just not as efficient as it once was. So to me, when you get Deshaun Watson, you got to think, what have the Browns done with this? Why do we like it when they hired him with Baker Mayfield? Because you wanted to take a system that could be quarterback proof, right? We're seeing it with Brock Purdy a little bit, right? We're seeing it with McVay getting the best out of Mayfield here for a short duration of time, the same way Kevin did in all reality, get some quality play out of the quarterback. But now you have a quarterback, Quincy, in my opinion, who is a guy you build everything around. He's an elevator. He's the guy that every single decision should filter through. So in the offseason, to me, what needs to change is they need to become a pass-oriented offense first and foremost. Everything they do should filter through throwing the football. And what that does, we're talking about an offense here who and there's a lot of smart data studies that have been out there and that tell you very clearly you don't have to run it to run play action efficiently. You can still get results. But I think that needs to be rechecked. I do think that there are some dwindling results and returns on that theory. So what I think you should do in Cleveland now with how they're structured and how they can go about getting some different pieces and matching their guys with Deshaun is they need to throw to run. I think they need to efficiently throw the football in order to open up lighter boxes to create some running lanes that they have not had. Because what they're doing is things are too bottlenecked, too congested, lacking skill players in space, and everything is very tight, congested, bottled up. And I think a problem is they don't throw it effectively enough from early down sets right now to open up lighter 6-5 man box stuff. So that's what I'd like them to do, sort of switch in, filter in more. You can get some air raid concepts mixed in there. You can get some West Coast staples. You can do a bunch of different things from the Air Coryell system. You can dive into a whole bunch of different philosophical stuff. But what I want them to do is find an efficient early down pass game, early game throwing system, which is very attainable with a hyper talented quarterback, to then find run answers off of that, right? Because I think that's what they should be aiming to close games with Nick Chubb. That's when Nick Chubb is at his best, closing football games. Or as we see 6 guys, a 6.5 man box because a guy's kind of on the fringe. You can take advantage of these 3 run concepts that can give you some advantages. So I just think that there's a philosophical change that needs to take place. That it is kind of predicated the run is going to marry to the pass and give us opportunities to throw it. I think it needs to be we're going to throw this thing until we can't throw it anymore, and then we're just going to think about what the Bills do, right? And you take what the Bills do and teams like that who have such aggressive throwing approaches that there's a 6-man box for Clyde Edwards-Helaire and KC or Jerick McKinnon, or there's a 6-man box for James Cook and Singletary, and they can run it, and you can find opportunities as the game evolves. And I think that's where the Browns need to get to. That's why they paid him $230. That's why they spent the money they did. And that's where my vision for where this whole thing's going. I don't want more tight ends. I want space creating wide receivers. I want guys who can run. I want guys who can quick twitch, separate immediately. That's what you need. And then you can then think about, I like Devin Singletary's a nice back. James Cook's a nice back. They're nice backs in these other high volume throwing teams. But, hey, Nick Chubb's in, man. Let's get him. You can take advantage of issues defenses are giving you in throwing by giving Nick the football out of the gun on several different ways, So that's kind of where I think it needs to evolve in this offseason. They cannot keep the status quo and expect it to just get better next year. It won't. They got to switch it up.
Definitely. So with that kind of an evolution and just like philosophy that's going to come with different guardrails for different positions, what do you think changes the most? Like, do you think they try to get lighter at running back? Like, obviously you're not getting rid of Nick Chubb this year, but do you think behind Nick Chubb that starts to change, right? Maybe they're looking for more agile, more fluid receiver type running backs. Maybe what changes at wide receiver? Does that change what they've been drafting, which has mainly been like 6'1", 6'2", 200-pound guys, like bigger wide receivers, not necessarily the big jump ball guys, but the guys in between there. Does that change how they look at personnel, tight end wise? Like, are we going to keep less tight ends on the roster? Is it just going to be David Njoku plus another guy? Like, and I think the last couple of years we kept like 9 offensive linemen or something crazy like that on the opening day roster. Does that change too?
Well, I think you answered some of your own questions. Yes, they need a receiving based running back. I think Kareem has done a nice job, but that's not his true calling card as a receiver. I think he's a downhill gap running back. I think they need somebody of that mold. There are plenty draftable names that are out there. There are also plenty of UDFAs that end up cracking that market who can do that stuff too. They need to find somebody that can handle that role. Nick can do some things. I think Nick can expand his skill set and still be on the field and involved in some of that stuff. But there's a time and place for Nick. Like, to me, he's 27, creeping up on the prime years, the end of the prime for these running backs. So, and I like Nick. I love Nick's probably one of the better running backs we'll ever see in Cleveland. But at this point, this is Deshaun Watson's franchise, right? So you need to build everything around getting the most out of Deshaun in the passing game, and then giving Nick opportunities off of that can help. So yeah, I mean, I'd like another back that's a bit more receiver mold. I know Jerome Ford had some success at Cincinnati as a receiving back, so he'll get some opportunities himself. Maybe they can work Demetric Felton into some of that stuff as an out of the backfield pass catcher. We'll see. There are opportunities in house that are there, but yeah, that's a shift. You're obviously, to me, you can play some 12. I like 12 personnel in the right situations. They can use it. They don't need to go out and hunt some early draft tight end, in my opinion. Like, that's not something they need to be going out and pursuing right now. David is more than good enough. I mean, he's a perfect 11 personnel tight end. Bryant can come in and do some things. I don't mind expanding on that role that Bryant has, because I think he's limited as an athlete and as a performer, but I'm not using premium money or picks to go get another tight end. I think you can get by with Bryant for a little while here. But yeah, I mean, as far as wide receiver goes, I don't care what they look like. I need them to separate, and I need them to be twitchy. That's what I need. You have a nice nuanced route runner in Cooper. You have a nice catch point receiver in Donovan Peoples-Jones. Doesn't separate much, but he'll catch the ball. He's a great backside dig type route runner. But I need some twitchy receiver or two, man, and they're going to be on the market. There are names that can be had. Doesn't have to be a massive overpay, in my opinion. I think there are plenty of decent answers to be had in this draft. There's always nice mid-round guys who can, rounds 2 through 5, who you can find who are twitched up guys who are separators, who might have a flaw here or there. But you're looking for a Renfro. You're looking for those types of guys in the middle rounds who can create some separation. They're not going to run away from you necessarily, but they are separation creators, the Cole Beasley types. Like, I need guys who can get open for him and get the football out efficiently and effectively. So that's my MO. I think the offensive line is fine. They have a 2-year window with this O-line now with Conklin signed that it's pretty obvious to me they're going to run it through 25 and then make a decision after that. The next 2 years, 23 and 24, a decision before 25, before another deal for Jed would kick in. So some things are in place. There's a couple personnel tweaks I would make, including back and receiver, that I think they could go out and get, spicy on. Could they go draft a vertical threat receiver and then get more from Cooper in the slot? There's a lot of options, man, that they can go about doing this, but they need to be, how do we become the most efficient pass game team that we can possibly be? Like, that to me is priority number one. They need to shift their focus. Some people are going to be mad about that. Probably some of your viewers aren't going to like what I'm saying, but run first teams don't win in the NFL, man. They don't win things that matter. You find one of those quarterbacks that can do this, who can handle the burden, and you build everything around making that system fit him. And I think that's what they need to work themselves like crazy on this offseason, is how they build it around fitting Deshaun and making him the best quarterback they can be, while also reaping the benefits of what an efficient throwing offense can do for the run game at various points throughout any given game.
Yeah, you just got to follow the money. I mean, like, there's a reason why Derrick Henry's not going to hit the market and get 240 guaranteed, right? No. Because teams don't believe, hey, we get Derrick Henry, we going to the Super Bowl. Like, that's just not how the running game is. Kind of a supplementary thing nowadays, especially. Like, you got to throw the ball. That's why quarterbacks are paid that much. And there's only so many people on the planet that can do this at a high level. And you touched on something I think that was interesting, which is, I want to figure out what they got going with that red zone offense, right? Like that's been a bit of an issue. And I think one of the things that I see Deshaun do well, which is he throws a real pretty fade ball, right, to the front pylon. He seems to prefer that spot, or maybe the guys prefer that spot. But Coop's not that kind of an explosive athlete that he's just going to go up and get it and get both his feet in. DPJ's weird because he can get his feet in. He can really stretch and he can jump. But he just doesn't come down with them as much as you would want to. Like, I think you have Njoku, who's kind of that. But outside of that, I don't think you have somebody who, I keep thinking of like 2019 Odell Beckham would really fit well on this team, right? Like, that's a guy that would be doing really well in the red zone offense, or at least what he gave the Rams in the red zone when he played last in 2021, which was, just quick route, get open, be an athlete, get up and get the ball and get in downs. That's been a struggling point here where, like, we have seen, I think we can count 4 or 5 red zone plays since Deshaun's been back where we're like, that should have been a touchdown, or that could have been a touchdown if we have a better athlete in there. And I don't think you need to draft like Garrett Wilson to get that for a red zone producer, but you do need to spend probably a good pick on it.
I know can't pass on George Pickens in the second round. Like, you just, those are the types of guys. Now, I don't know if this draft, to me, as I look at it, it doesn't reek of the depth of wide receiver the last draft had, which has a chance to be a historic wide receiver class when we look back on it in 5 years. But you can't. You're right. I mean, you're talking about a player that's not just, hey, here's a $3 million, type of deal. Like, you're going to have to pay somebody. You're going to have to go get someone who matters there. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what you can do, what assets you can do. I flirted around with the idea of, like, is a Jerry Jeudy out of Denver attainable? But you got to give up somebody like Martin Emerson or Greg Newsome to get him, go from a position of strength to get somebody at a position of need. Like, that is an interesting thing to me. Like, you're going to have to pay to get that guy, whether it's a really nice pick, your second round pick moving up maybe a little bit, or a trade that it's going to be, well, we had to give somebody to get somebody. But you're right. They need a dynamic receiver threat, not necessarily a number one type, a huge number one pursuit, but somebody of the Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy mold of receiver, young, clearly gifted, a separation type. Jerry's a bit more lengthy. He can do some of those things you're talking about with body contortion things. But there are going to be some guys that are floated and dangled on the market. It's a horrible free agent class. So you're talking about more than likely, flat out, you're talking about a trade or drafting a guy. But that is, to me, as I'm talking about this offense that I dream about and what it looks like when they're all buttoned up, and this to me looks a lot like KC, a lot like Buffalo runs, a lot like what they do in Cincy with Burrow. Is we're going to filter everything through the quarterback, then we better give this guy a lot of different wide receiver answers, right? I'm not asking for T. Higgins and that group. I'm not asking for Jamar Chase because I'm realistic about it, but I do think there are some types that you can find that give you some similar vibes to that, and then you try to supplement it with some creativity. And hey, we also have Nick Chubb, so maybe when you only get a couple yards from Jerick McKinnon or Isaiah Pacheco, you get 30 yards from Nick because he can break some of these, and it's just a burden on defenses. So that's the dream to me, is like shifting the thought process around how they run this thing and then supplementing it with some guys that I don't think they have to break the bank to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's like, when I look at this offense, I think they have some great pieces to get up and down the field. You know what I mean? It's like the finishing the drives. I think that's where they probably need that one player, and I think we touched on that. And it'd be interesting to see what they do there. There are options that always come up in March that we don't really see coming in December, right? I think that's something we all need to kind of keep an eye on, is that there are going to be guys available that we're like, that we don't think are available, and they might not be as expensive as you would think. Like who would have thought Amari Cooper would have been here this time last year at the price that we got him? You know what I mean? Like so it's
very likely that DeAndre Hopkins wants out of Arizona. These happen every year. And can you find a way to make that contract fit, right? Like I'm not the expert here. I don't know what they can maneuver and what they can do. But to your point, there's always somebody February through April who says, I want out. And they usually are players that matter. So can you find a way? And I mean, there's been debate, Quincy, about the nature of their all-in mantra. I think Hayden Grove put out a great tweet today reminding everybody of age. Miles, 27, Deshaun, 27, Nick, 27. These guys are in it. They cannot punt any other moment from now until some of these guys are just done in the league. So, like, they need to be as all in gets. They need to be spending on those players, maximizing, breaking their cap to the point that they understand there's going to be later ramifications. But we know that right now we want to give it everything we've got. There is no rollover. There is nothing of the sort. They need to be every penny on the table. So I do hope that when we hear some of the buzz of those things, Stephon Diggs once out of Minnesota type buzz, like they're talking about whatever it would take to get that type of guy into Cleveland and push them over the top, because there is a cultural change I think is set to happen on offense. And with that, they need another difference maker in some form or fashion. Now, whether you can draft that difference maker in the second round, to be determined, but they need to figure out a way to add something to this program.
Yeah, they definitely do. And you brought up the interesting points of where I think they've been trying to get something kicking since these guys are like 24, right? Since 2019. Yeah. But Baker just didn't pan out to be consistent enough at the level that you needed him to be at to really feel comfortable betting on that. That's why Deshaun's here, because it's like, as these guys, Miles gets older, as Nick Chubb gets older, you gotta feel comfortable at that quarterback position. And now Deshaun's here. You kind of bought yourself a year, because he's a year younger. So he's 27 instead of Baker's 28. So you bought yourself that year, and now you have that guy, or at least you hope you're pretty sure you have that guy. And then now it's like, hey, there's no wasting time here, right? Like there's no, let's see what we can accumulate for 2024. Like it has to happen pretty soon here. And, I like Kevin, but if it don't happen in 2023, and I'm not saying he got to get to the Super Bowl, but if there's not a realistic hope that this team can in 2023 by this time next year, then nobody's surviving that. Like that's not something that people tend to survive. Like, I say that when the expectations are highest is when the seat's the hottest. That's just how this works. Nick Saban.
It's the evaluation year for all these guys next year. I mean, everything is on the table. There is no, we're waiting. We saw Deshaun got suspended 11 instead of sit. There is none of that, man. This is it. This has all been building to.
If they get through this year, this is the mulligan year. Like this is the one you get to be like, okay, weird stuff happened, but bad stuff can happen in 2023. It's not going to matter. Like you're going to have, like we did this with Baker last year. It was like, hey, you got to overcome it if you're going to be playing. And you got to play well. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I know there's all these things that we can say and punt it down the road, but we don't have that time anymore. And that's especially true in 2023, where it's like, hey, Kevin, either you have your assistants that are going to work out or not. Like, it's got to work out this year. You got to overcome something, so it's going to be interesting. This is, I mean, if I would assume they're probably going to finish and win these last two. I think the Browns are probably going to win these last two. We'll see what happens. I think this is probably the more difficult one of the two to get. I think you finish 4-2, nobody's going anywhere. But it's going to be interesting to see how this rolls into 2023, and just I think even Jimmy Haslam understands on some level, like this cannot be a let's start another rebuild, let's fire a bunch of people year, because you just can't afford.
There's too much on the line next year. There's too much on the line. You can replace a defensive coordinator, but overhauling everything, shipping out every coach, shipping out people that matter, that's a huge risk, Quincy, when you're going into when everything's supposed to hit stride. So. I don't see it happening. Even if they lost these two games, I really don't see it. I don't see it happening. So, not that a coach can't come in and figure it out and We see it all the time. There are coaches across the league who get new jobs and they figure it out and they win games, but I just don't think that's the right formula right here. I really don't. So I expect large parts of this to be back, but I do think a shift at some spots. But you got to remember, like, there's just they want to hit the ground running. If they want to pour every dollar into this thing, this window right now, they can worry about rebuilding in 4 or 5 years around the phase 2 of Deshaun. But for now, this is phase 1. This is really, we are all in with Nick, Denzel, Miles. We'll deal with it when those guys are 30. We'll look at it, right? We'll look at it and figure it out. But for now, they need to be like, if they're not all in and they're not spending every dollar available, finding out ways to get big names, I'll be really disappointed, because you've been putting people off and telling them to wait and telling them to wait and telling them to wait. And I've excused a lot of it the same way you have, where they've been in very justifiable situations to not really, maybe 75, 80, 90% all in, but not go sign Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph week 8 type. They need to be every corner of the improvement market doing whatever they can to do it, because this is it, man. And if they try to punt it and hold off and we cut this corner, we did that. Nah, man, that's not it. That's not what you've been trying to sell us for so long. We know you're willing to spend the money, so do it. Get it done.
Yeah, this is not the year to trade somebody for future first round picks. Like, this is
not at all.
The window is no longer punted. You got to get it now. Jake, I think a lot of interesting things were said in this pod. Appreciate you for coming on. You can find Jake at the OBR, also on Twitter at Jake Burns. He does a lot of great work, a lot of great film reviews. He posts those clips on Twitter. They go viral almost every time after the games. So make sure you check him out. Make sure you follow him, read his stuff, and then check out his podcast on OBR with it's on everything that podcasts are on, right? Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Music. It's a great listen. I personally listen to it, so you want to listen to what I listen to, check it out. And he did not pay me to say that. I can say that right in front of him. He did not pay me to say that.
Respect is mutual, man. Always love to come on the show. One of the few in the market that I know knows what he's talking about, and always respect the banter, man, and keep doing this for years to come. Hopefully they start matching it with some quality play, my friend.
I would love to only have to talk about the film, man. I would love.
You and me both.
But all right, man. Appreciate you for being on. Everybody else, have a great day. Have an even better night.